And I'm also excited to see what other companies do with this new Seiko GMT movement. I hope to see smaller brands taking advantage of the 4R34. And here we go. The Sector GMT watches from Nodus are the first watches that I've had my hands on that use the NH34 Seiko movement. That's pretty exciting for me, a GMT guy and a cheap guy, despite what my collection might imply. This is also cool because these are the first watches from Nodus that I've had a good look at. I know a lot of people, especially affordable watch nerds, who really enjoy Nodus watches, and while I try not to talk to dangerously unstable people, word has gotten to me. A bunch of collectors who I begrudgingly respect like Nodus watches and Nodus as a brand. Nodus is based in Los Angeles, and despite that handicap, it does make some pretty compelling pieces, all of which are under $750, and that includes these Sector GMT watches, which are just $450. A few weeks ago, I took the Blue Dial Sector GMT to a watch meetup here in Portland, Oregon. I just laid the watch down alongside the dozens of other pieces that people brought. I didn't try to draw people's attention to it. And one after another, people picked it up, looked closely, and then asked me about it. And one after another, people's jaws dropped. And that was fascinating for me to see. I often bring watches to events to gauge people's reactions. Usually they are watches that people have read about, or they're from really well-known brands. But it was cool to see people get introduced to a new watch, and in many cases, a totally new brand. These watches are far from perfect, but what they offer at this price, I just think a lot of you should know about these pieces. And more importantly, I think you should know my opinion about these pieces, because unsolicited advice on the internet, that's the real value here. The Sector GMT watches are 38mm across. I measure them at 12.3mm thick and 47mm long. They have 20mm lug spacings and a water resistance of 100 meters. They have a screw-down crown, drilled lugs, and a flat sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating on the underside of the crystal. Again, these each cost $450 and they come on a Horween leather strap. You're seeing the Sector GMT on my 7-inch wrist. I actually just measured my wrist again because you people. And at the moment, it's exactly 7 inches. But today I plan to eat it's not important what I plan to eat, but my wrist will probably be larger by the end of the day. 38mm is a really happy size for a watch like this that's not quite as sporty as a dive watch and definitely not a dress watch. I think Nodus could have gone with 40mm, but I think the watch would have lost some elegance that it has. So 38mm seems just right. At 47mm long, the lugs are a bit longer than some other watches that are 38mm across. Many 40mm watches I'm familiar with have this same length. So this could be an issue for some people with smaller wrists, and when I say issue, I mean an issue of taste. Anyone with a 6-inch wrist can wear this watch. You can do it, I promise. You just might not like how it looks on you, little buddy. Inside the watch is the Seiko NH34 movement. This is what makes these watches possible. These would be fine watches without a GMT hand with just local time and date, but it's the GMT movement that interests me and frankly is the reason this video exists. The NH34 movement is the same as the Seiko 4R34 movement that came out last summer, and that's in this SSK 005, which I wear a lot and adore. So this is a collar GMT, as in I'm going to call someone in a different time zone. That means that the GMT hand is independently set rather than the local hour hand being independently set. I like this type of GMT movement, the collar style. I do travel quite a bit, but not daily. But just about every day I do talk with people in exotic, distant lands like Singapore, the Australian outback, and Detroit. Turning the crown in one direction advances the GMT hand. Turning the crown in the other direction advances the date. The date at 6 o'clock, which is one of the improvements Nodus made over the Seiko GMT, in my unassailable opinion. Another improvement is that Nodus regulates these movements to be plus or minus 10 seconds per day. Without those adjustments, the NH34 movement is about plus 40 to minus 20 per day, so that's a huge and welcome improvement. The watches come on a Horween leather strap that has quick-release spring bars and a Nodus buckle. These straps are thick and feel great. They need to be broken in a bit, which I've been doing, and it's getting more supple. These seem like really good straps for a $450 watch. On their own, these straps cost $50. But as I like to do, because I guess I get bored easily, I put a bunch of different straps on these watches. It's not for everyone, but I like this Bund style strap. For my size wrist, 38mm is the largest watch I would put on this style of strap. And no, I don't know where this strap is from. Nor do I know where this mesh strap is from. These can be bought for under $20 from dozens of websites. Don't stress about it, just pick one. It's going to feel cheap, and that's because it is cheap, and that's fine, and just live your life. The Elite silicone strap from Barton Bands is also kind of cool on these Sector GMT watches. Super comfy. Same with this Perlon strap from somewhere on the internet where straps are sold. Like with the mesh straps, buy a cheap one, they're basically all the same. Aside from the price, what really seemed to interest people at my watch group was what's under the crystal. As far as I can tell, these dials are the same, they're just in different colors. They have concentric circular brush finishing with the GMT track being framed and with a matte finish, I think. The dial seems to be flat, but the way the 24-hour ring is finished, it looks like it's lower than the rest of the dial, which is a really cool effect. The date window is framed and has a chamfer and a lume plot just below it. All the numerals on the dial are lumed. Points to notice for that. I'm a fan. But points deducted for a light lume application. I realize this isn't a dive watch, but I wish this glowed a little brighter and a little longer. But I do like the font. I think this is Futura, right? Yeah? Pretty sure this is Futura. The rehaut on each watch, that kind of angled wall at the edge of the dial, at the bottom half of each is the color that matches the GMT hand. It's a touch that's not necessary, but I think it adds to the personality, much like my humor adds to these videos. Right? I mean, is this thing on? And you can probably see how deep these watches are. It's not that they're too thick at 12.3mm, but there's a lot of space between the dial and the crystal. I understand the physics here, making room for 4 hands. But one improvement could be to make the case slimmer and to use a raised box crystal. Probably more expensive, if it's even possible at all. But hey, this is the internet. It's powered by uninformed suggestions. The case is another place where this doesn't seem like a $450 watch. The bezel is brushed radiating outwardly. I don't know what you call this kind of brushing with the grain going out. Let me know if you know. The tops of the lugs are brushed radially. That I know. And the sides of the cases are brushed horizontally, and between the sides of the cases and the tops of the cases is a really cool polished chamfer. The edges aren't crisp like you might find on a watch several times this price, but, you know, then several times this price. And that's the thing here, or maybe that's the main thing here. For this price, I think this is amazing. Now, I admit, I haven't explored a lot of affordable small brands, especially ones with mechanical GMT movements. I rarely make videos about watches under $1,000, so I have no frame of reference. I'm like a child who wanders into the middle of a movie and... Anyway, you know what I'm saying. But when I look at my Seiko SSK005, which has the same price, though it does have a bracelet, or when I look at much more expensive watches, I'm pretty convinced that this Sector GMT is a great value. I could see this making its way into a lot of watch collections, but even cooler, I think this could be a great potential first mechanical watch for someone who's interested. The price isn't too intimidating. I mean, there are quartz fashion watches that cost this much. And the complication is more useful than the chronographs that a lot of newbies tend to gravitate towards. And yeah, I think the Sector GMT could be a good first step on the slippery, dangerous slope of watch collecting.